Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Barbara Hemphill, Vision Accelerator, founder of the Productive Environment Institute, organizational expert. And we'll learn from her proven framework to identify and eliminate clutter in every area of your life, from your desk to your digital files to your mind. And we'll learn how to make clearer decisions faster and finally create the space you need to focus on what truly matters. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. We'll come to the India connection later. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can tame clutter by making decisions faster. We'll talk about all this. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, your story, so that the audience knows who they are listening to, Barbara.
Well, 47 years ago, I moved actually from India to New York City, and I had adopted 3 orphan children and brought them to the U.S., and I wanted them to be my top priority, but my husband worked for a nonprofit and didn't make enough money to pay for living expenses in New York, so I wanted to add income to the family. And I decided the best way to do that would be to find a problem in the world that I could solve that people would pay me for. And so to do that, I took my children to the playground and I would just sit and listen to what people were talking about. And I began to hear people talking about disorganization, about their frustration of all the stuff in their life, particularly papers. People would say things like, I haven't eaten in the dining room for months because it's piled full of papers, or I haven't filed my income taxes because I don't have the receipts. And I decided that that was an opportunity. So I ran a $7 ad that said, disorganized, I organize kitchens, files, closets, you name it, call Barbara Hemphill. And that's what launched it. I got a call from a woman whose husband was an attorney. He was a solo practitioner, didn't have an assistant or anything, and he died very suddenly, leaving piles of paper everywhere, both in his home office and in his traditional office. And she didn't have a clue what to do. And so I went in and started sorting the papers and quickly learned that paper, I did organize lots of things, closets, cupboards, kitchens, garages, but I learned that paper was the most difficult. And what I recognized was that it was because it wasn't the paper, it was what the paper represents. Pieces of paper represent our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our intentions. And in order to make those decisions, you have to be willing to move through that emotion. And a lot of people just didn't want to do that. And that's where I came in, was not to answer for them, because everybody has to decide it for themselves. It has no right or wrong answer. I always say that organization is an art. And people will say, what should I do? And I'll say that's the wrong question. The question is, what will you do?
Absolutely. What will you do? But you see, that was when you placed that was 1978.
Yes.
And you talk about papers. Later on, our life got filled with so many digital files and everything. And now we talk about a lot of cluttering of the mind. How did this journey, in this whole journey, you saw these things, they came, they swept us, and amidst all these things, you were the one who were trying to help people declutter. Help us understand about this whole journey of yours from that angle.
Well, when I was dealing, as you said, with paper, but when the digital age came in, first of all, I didn't want to seem old-fashioned, and so I renamed my company. My company was originally called the Paper Tiger Institute, because I was known as the Paper Tiger Lady, because I wrote the book called Taming the Paper Tiger. But I didn't want to seem old-fashioned, so I renamed the company the Productive Environment Institute. And we define productive environment as an intentional setting in which you can accomplish your work and enjoy your life and enable others to do the same. And I saw it especially with email, because people would open up email and they would open, close, open, close, open, close, and 40 minutes would go by and nothing had changed except their spirits fell because they realized how far behind they were. And so then we began to deal with the digital. But then what began to evolve was recognizing how much people struggled with making those decisions. And in 2014, I wrote a book called Less Clutter, More Life. And the premise was that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. Because what I recognized in working with hundreds and hundreds of clients, and it wasn't only me, but I began to train other people to do what I do, to train other entrepreneurs. Because one day I was on the platform giving a speech talking about clutter. And back in those days, nobody was really talking about that. In fact, I went to the Small Business Administration here in the US to ask them to help me start my business. And they laughed me out of the room and said, this is crazy. Nobody's going to pay for helping get organized. Now it's an $11.8 billion industry. But I was standing on the platform and realizing that in a way, I wasn't solving a problem. I was creating a problem because I was telling the audience what a negative impact all the clutter was having on their life. But I was only one person, and one person couldn't solve the problem. And if they could do it themselves, they would have already done it. They wouldn't have the problem. So that was when I began in 1992 to begin training other people to do what I done. So we've worked with thousands of people. And what we saw over and over was that when people had difficulty making a decision, and especially if they had difficulty letting go of things, whether it was stuff that they put in a storage room, or whether it was piles of paper on their desk, or whether it was digital documents on, open up people's computers and they're just be covered with all these documents. If I ask enough questions, I would find that they had had a severe emotional loss in their life. And that hanging on to that stuff was really trying to fill up the hole in their heart, because they were afraid they would make a mistake, afraid they would offend somebody, afraid they would forget something, afraid that they were being irresponsible, afraid that they'd let it go and want it back. And I realized that we had to address those fears. We had to address that emotion to get through it. And it doesn't have a right or wrong answer. So we implement in Productive Environment Institute, we implement what we call the cost factor, which is you can keep everything you want if you are willing to pay the price. And the price is time, space, money, and energy. And people make different decisions. And our job as consultants is not to make the decision for them, but to help them understand what the price is that they're paying for that decision so they can make it. And I've had clients many years ago. I had a client back in still in the paper days, where she had 35, it was someone in public relations, 35,000 files. But we don't use the term filing system, we use the term finding system. And we had a system. So yes, she could keep it, but it took a room and lots of files and 2 people to maintain it, because her emotions required that she needed it. On the other hand, there are other people that recognize that less is really more, because the less we have, the less stuff we have, the more space there is in our brain. And the most important environment is your brain. It's what is in your brain, what you are telling yourself and what you're trying to keep in yourself. And one of the big myths is we see this all the time. People say, if I just got organized, if I just had a system, I'd be able to do all that. And it's a lie. It's not true. It's really a matter of figuring out, what were you created to do? And then looking at that piece of paper or that email or that digital document or that to-do list or that relationship and saying, is this helping me do what it is that I need to do? And the 4 words on which the business is based is clutter is postponed its decisions. And so it's all about deciding whether whatever this is, will help you accomplish your work and enjoy your life.
Absolutely. So, You call clutter as postponed decisions. And at the same time, you say people stick to that because you know what all that so called clutter means to them. When you talk about paper, you say what that paper means to them. Where is the decision part in this? Help us understand from that point of view so that people who are looking at it from both the aspects, they can find a way out of your solution.
So one of the techniques we use is something we call the art of wastebasketry. And so the question is, if you're looking at this piece of paper or this digital document and you're saying, okay, what's the worst thing that would happen if I didn't have this? If I deleted this email or deleted this document or threw this piece of paper in the mail, what would happen? What might happen? And then you say, is that a price I'm willing to pay? And again, it's not a moral issue. You can do it. Maybe you can delegate it. Maybe you can hire somebody else to do it. But you have to decide, first of all, whether it's important to do it. And if it is important to do it, then what's the best way? Are you the right person to do it? Or what is the most productive way to do it? Like maybe you were going to send an email. Maybe there's a difficult situation you have with a staff member or colleague, and you're going to have an email. Probably not a good way. The better way is to have a conversation, to get in front of that person and really talk about it, because often the communication gets misunderstood and the situation just gets worse. So deciding, is this the best way to handle this, is really critical.
Right, Barbara. Who are your clients in today's time? Your first client was an, attorney's wife. And today we have got so much different sort of clutter. So that's why I asked, who are your clients in today's time?
Well, our clients tend to be, first of all, they're very intelligent. They're very active. They've been active. In many cases, there are people who are in a transition in their career life. So maybe they've been in the corporate world and they're retiring, or maybe they had a business and they sold the business, or maybe they've been in the corporate world and they want to go into business, or maybe they have an empty nest. Maybe they were raising children and now the children are gone, or maybe they've gone through a divorce and they're in people that are in a transition. They're people who are very active. They're active and they've taken lots of courses. They've done lots of things. They've read lots of things. And that means they've accumulated a lot of information, a lot of stuff, books. We have books. We have a client right now that has some like 30,000 books that she's accumulated, because when she was a child, and this is such an example of how our young experiences impact us. When she was a little girl, she went into a place where there were 10,000 books. And she said, someday I'm going to live in a place where there are 10,000 books. Well, guess what? Today she lives in a place where there's 35,000. But now, as she's approaching the last half of her life, she realizes that's not serving her well. And when she leaves this earth, which we all will, her family is going to be left with that. And they're leaving a family a burden. So one of the questions that I ask people all the time is, if you left this earth tonight, we're all going to leave at some time, but we never know when. It could be in the next few minutes. What regret would you have? That question is so critical, because the answer is clutter. Clutter is anything that prevents you from accomplishing your work and enjoy your life. So it may be something like, I don't have a good relationship with one of my children. Well, then it's time to do something about it, because knowing that relationship is bad and that's not a good thing means it's time to do something. And as long as you are breathing, there's always something you can do. Often when we ask that question, if you left this earth tonight, what regret would you have? I cannot tell you the numbers of times that people will say, the mess I'm leaving my children. Or my business partner, if you're in business. I mean, we work with companies and we say to employees, when you're an employee of a company, that information you are managing is not yours. It belongs to the organization, and you are responsible to organize it in such a way that if you're not there tomorrow, if something happens to you that you can't come to work, you're not leaving your company in a mess.
Absolutely. So, how does one simple person get started who has got the paper files also? We have got the digital files also. We got the mental files also in today's time. How and where do they get started?
Well, there's any number of ways. The most important thing is to get started, to make a decision. I can do this. We have found that there are three components necessary to get and stay organized. First is a system. You cannot clear clutter randomly, because if you're clearing clutter randomly, you're just shuffling. You're just moving things from one to another. You're taking one idea and putting it in your head and substituting with another. The second is accountability. We are all far more willing to be accountable to somebody else than ourselves. I mean, that's why people go to gyms and have gym memberships. Like, most of us could work out at home perfectly easily, but we don't. So we go to the gym and we pay somebody so that we work out. And the third thing is in community. And one of the principles of Productive Environment Institute is together we are better. There is so much shame around disorganization. In fact, one of my first clients 40 years ago now ended up being an ambassador in the world for the United States government. And she had me come to work from 6 p.m. to midnight because she did not want her colleagues to know that she was so disorganized she had to hire a professional. So we put our programs together. We do it, first of all, we give our clients a system. They're accountable to us and to each other, but then we're doing it in community. So we can see we all struggle. There is no one in the world that I've ever talked to that doesn't have some area in their life that's cluttered. It might be a physical area. It might be an emotional area. It's a project that they've wanted to do. One of the ones, I do a lot of work with people who want to write books. Because interestingly enough, in America at least, and I don't know if it's true in India, but it's a good question. In America, a lot of people have kept their china, their crystal, their art because they're leaving it for their children. And now they are finding out that their children and grandchildren don't want it. And that brings up this whole thing about, what does that say about my life? Does that mean that I've wasted my life? So then I talk with people at saying that the legacy that you can leave your children is your story, because all of us have stories and we all learn. Jesus taught in parables because people love stories and people love your story. So many times research shows that 80% of the population believes there's a book. Only 2% actually publish it. So often we're helping people with a particular project. It might be writing a book, but it might be clearing a storage room. It might be working on getting a business started, but it's helping them move forward so that they can be all that God created them to be.
Absolutely. So, Barbara, you talk about, that people get a few things wrong about decluttering. What are the few things, myths, if we want to call it, are those so that people can know, okay, I'm not thinking in the right direction?
Well, one of the interesting things is if you do a search, you will see that people quote me often, clutters, postponed decisions, but they usually add a word. They will say clutter is only postponed decisions, or simply postponed decisions, or merely postponed decisions. So if you are somebody who's having difficulty making decisions for whatever reason, and somebody says to you, oh, clutter's just postponed decisions, how does that make you feel? So that adding that word, making decisions, is difficult. If it were easy, we would all do it. We wouldn't have a problem. And there are far more people that do have a problem with clutter somewhere in their life than don't. That's one. The other one is that people think, if I just got organized, I would be able to do all this, keep all this, have all this. And that is a lie. Most of us live with that the problem is the lack of system, or the problem is the lack of our discipline. But the real problem is that we have unrealistic expectations. So one question that we ask clients hundreds of times is, number one, we use a 5-step process, and it starts with state your vision. So if someone comes to us and says, okay, I want to organize my paper, or I want to organize my digital, or I want to get rid of the storage. In America, we have thousands and thousands of storage units that people have used to put postponed decisions. They didn't want to just set it, so they put it in a storage room and they pay for it. So we say, whatever it is that you want to organize, what's the vision? Without a vision, the people perish. Like, what would it feel like? What would you be able to do that you can't do now? And we do that. Then secondly, it's identify your obstacles. What have you tried that didn't work, or what are you afraid might prevent you from doing it? And three is commit your resources. It's like, how much time are you willing to spend on this project, or who can help you? So in order to reach this vision, overcoming these obstacles with these resources, then we come up with a plan. So step 4 is design and execute your plan. And we don't do it for you. We help you to do it. And then step 5, and the one where most people fail because they give up too soon, is sustain your success. Very few plans work the first time. There are new things that come in. So you have to go back and say, okay, my vision changed. I thought I wanted this, but I've discovered it's really slightly different, or here's a new obstacle, or here's a new resource. So we're helping people with this 5-step plan to help them get where they want. Where do they start? It doesn't really matter. Start somewhere. However, I have to say, in my experience with thousands of people in over 4 decades, if you have a problem with paper, it's the hardest. It's even harder than digital in many ways. Digital is just a bigger, faster, hidden mess. But if you will do the paper, then everything else gets easier, and it will teach you how to make decisions. And once your paper is organized, everything else will feel better. I remember one time I was autographing books at Barnes & Noble in New York City, and I made the comment that I've often learned that when people had trouble letting go of their paper, it was because of a loss in their life. And when I was done speaking, a young man in his 20s came up to me and he said, I have a small apartment in New York City, and it's covered with paper, and I haven't had anybody in it for months. And he said, I come home from work at 9, and I say, okay, tonight's the night I'm going to clean up this paper. And he said, I pick up the pieces of paper and I just become paralyzed. And then he looked at me and he said, my mother died when I was 6. Are you telling me I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can manage my paper? And I said, well, I'm not a mental health professional, so I can't tell you that for sure. But what I can tell you from my years of experience is that if you will find someone that you trust, probably not a family member because there are too many relationships there, but you can find someone you trust that will help you decide what you need and want to keep, you will solve your paper problem, and it will make the rest of life easier. I told that one time I was speaking to a group of 700 executive women at a university, and I told that story, and a woman walked up and she said, you just saved my marriage. I said, wow, that's a pretty dramatic statement. Do you mind explaining? She said, I came to this conference with the intention of telling my husband, to whom I've been married 13 years, that I was leaving because he keeps all this stuff around me and I have allergies and it makes it dusty. And she stopped and the tears started coming out her face. And she said, I never realized until I heard you that it wasn't that he wouldn't let go, but that he couldn't. His mother died when he was 7. So I said, may I make a suggestion? And she said, of course. And I said, go home and say something to the effect of, I never understood before how important all of this is to you. Let's work together to figure out how you can keep it and we can still live together. And I stayed in touch with them for 8 months. And it changed everything, because the more we tell somebody else that they should let go, the more they hang on. So one of the things you want to make sure of is that you start with your own stuff, not somebody else's.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's look at the young generation. They have a lot of digital things to use, and many a times a lot of these people either have emails and saved files everywhere in everything. How does that impact them? What would you like to tell them about decluttering from the very beginning, or they have to wait for a time in their life that they have to declutter those digital files from there, especially on the mobile phones and all?
Well, it's an interesting question, because a number of years ago, I was invited by a very large pharmaceutical company to come in and work with a new department. And I was so excited because it was the first time that I ever had the opportunity to prevent a mess from happening. So I introduced system. We use the acronym for system of saving you space, time, energy, and money. Every time you have to do something repeatedly, you need a system. And so I was so excited. I thought, okay, I'm going to show them how to do this. And it was a miserable failure. And the reason was there wasn't any pain. Most of the time, we wait to change until there is pain. And the irony was 3 years later, the executive director of that department called me back and said, I keep getting calls from employees now saying, where's that paper tiger lady? Because they hadn't made the decisions. They didn't realize it's like, oh, I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with that later. And so one of the questions that clients often ask is, how long is this going to take and how much is it going to cost? And my answer is, I don't know, because I don't know how quickly you make decisions. I don't know how much you have. But what I can tell you for sure is the longer you wait, the longer it will take. So and the more you will lose in lost opportunities. So I say to young people, decide, and you can begin to use that art of wastebasket very quickly, so that when you see that digital document or you see that idea, you can say, is this something, whatever this is this really helping me to do and be all that I want to be? What's my vision? And that vision needs to come alive. And then when there's anything that comes into it, it's like, is this helping that vision or is it holding it back?
Absolutely. What about mental clutter? How does that happen? Is it about digital files or it comes suddenly from somewhere else? What is mental clutter if we understand it from a common person's point of view, Barbara?
Well, mental clutter is complicated because the mental clutter is often the result of statements they were made from other people about us. Which is very sad, but we take that in. And all the scientific research says that what we put into our brain is something that becomes true. And so if we were said something, you'll never be successful doing that. That is never going to work. Then that brings failure to us because we've taken that in. So I go back to vision. It is really, really important that we identify, what do we want to leave this earth? What is the legacy I want to leave? What are the things that I want to do? And many of us are far more willing. This is kind of the irony. Many people, and myself, this is something we teach what we need to learn, right? Let me just say, I am not a naturally organized person. I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was a musician by training, an artist. And I love to start things and I don't like to finish things. And I love the big picture. And I don't love details. But I was blessed to be in a family. I grew up on a farm. Well, if you're a farmer, you have to have systems because the crops don't grow and the cows don't give milk if you don't have systems. And my mother worked for the owner of a bank, and it was an award-winning bank. And I grew up with her. We did things in systems. And so I was very blessed. So the reason that what we teach works, it was meant for disorganized people. And so it's really important that you believe that you can do it. You have to believe that there is a better way to do it and that you can accomplish your work and be more successful by letting go of the things that don't really serve you. So the question always is, what's the next action? Often people, they look at a huge project and they don't start it because it's a big project. And so if you have a vision, first of all, you do have to have a vision. What will success with that project? But then it's like, what is the next action, the very next action? And here's the other thing. All the brain research shows that it's critical that we celebrate our successes. So if you've got huge piles of paper on your desk, take a small pile, make decisions about it, and then make sure that you compliment yourself. You say, that's good. I'm going to do it again. It seems I was very reluctant because I was like, well, it wasn't a big deal. I should have done more. I didn't do enough. Has exactly the opposite. The more negative things you say over yourself, the worse it's going to get. So you congratulate yourself. So I was working with a coach who was talking about the importance of celebrating. And I was having a hard time with that because I'm a perfectionist. I wanted to do it perfectly. So I decided that I needed to connect my celebrating to something I liked. I'm a musician and I love music. So I decided that when I was working on a project that I was struggling with, as soon as I got something done right, I would sing, amen, 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 amen. And my husband laughed. He said, what is this? I said, I am celebrating my success. So celebrating it may be having a cup of tea. It may be taking a deep breath. It may be hugging someone you love, but please celebrate your success and then say, what is the next action I can take? Do that action and celebrate that success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much to learn about all this from you, Barbara. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about your books, and perhaps become your client also. What's the best way for them to do so?
There is a website, lesscluttermorelife.com, and that's a short 14-minute video that talks about the premises that we are dealing with now, and it will help people understand how they can make decisions. And you can go to my website, barbarahemphill.com. All of my books are on Amazon. And thank you so much for having me. I really like to spread this word because I know that eliminating clutter will help people accomplish their work and enjoy their lives and enable others to do the same.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.